Welcome back, all my advanced squad leader fellow players out there. This is your host, ID Jester, and we're doing part 5 of Know Your ASL. As you can see, just in time for the holidays and to get everybody into a festive spirit, we are going to talk about prisoners and the rules associated with taking prisoners and such. This is actually the second video I recorded on this. I didn't like how the first video turned out. As you can see as I scroll down, there is quite a lot of rules associated with prisoners. I think we have like 4.5 or 5 pages worth of rules talking about prisoners, rules associated with prisoners, and such. And after reviewing my last video, I decided, well, instead of me just sitting here reading the rules to you and kind of going over them step by step by step, what I thought I would do to make it a little more interesting is I have used our wonderful little vassal module here, and I've set up some different scenarios on the vassal module with the ASL. And I'm hoping that through the examples that I play through here, we can cover some of the basic rules associated with prisoners. For those of you who are following along, we're going to use Section A of the rulebook, subsection 20, and all the associated rules with prisoners. I guess the main driving force about prisoners is to explain the understanding about whether or not you should actually think about looking into the rules and associated with taking prisoners. There are quite a lot of them, as I already mentioned, but there are some advantages in taking prisoners. So you might be saying to yourself, well, you're either taking prisoners or you're not taking prisoners, and you've once you have decided to invoke no quarter, which is the rule associated with not taking prisoners, and basically at that point, once you've invoked that rule, either through not accepting the prisoners or through a massacre, once you've done that, then for the rest of the scenario, you're going to have units that refuse to surrender to you any longer, and they're basically going to rout away from you, risk interdiction, etc., etc. So there are some strategic and tactical elements that you have to think about when you're talking about whether or not you want to accept prisoners. The easiest way about it is just say, no, I don't want to accept prisoners, invoke no quarter rule, and from then on, you don't have to worry about any of the rules associated with taking prisoners and such. But unfortunately, you could be hamstringing yourself because when your opponent does no longer have to allow you to take prisoners and can then rout away from you, you have the possibility of those units routing away and rallying at some point and then coming back later on in this scenario to you as units again. And if this happens over and over and over again, instead of accepting these units as prisoners and having to deal with those units as prisoners, you have decided to do the no quarter and take the easy way out, but it can actually come back to be detrimental to you because these units that are no longer surrendering to you are going to come back as full-fledged units and fighting against you and capturing objectives and basically causing major problems to you. So I want people to understand that even though there are quite a few rules associated with taking prisoners, once you understand the rules, they're not complex. They're very simple rules. Once you understand these rules, it can be very advantageous for you to take prisoners instead of just invoking no quarter. So let's talk about the prisoner rules here, and when do enemy units surrender to you? If we look at section 20.21, any broken infantry unit during its rout phase that is both adjacent to a good known order enemy infantry or cavalry unit and unable to route away from it, or, and notice I have that highlighted, only unit that is able to route away through interdiction or resulting to roll crawl. If either one of those possibilities exists, that unit will surrender to the enemy unit as its prisoner instead. The captor's choice of unit receiving the surrender if more than one unit qualifies. It first will abandon all of its support weapons. A stack of broken units that simultaneously surrenders must be accepted or rejected as a stack. So you have to accept all of them at one time. If there are not enough guards for all of the surrendering units, the excess units are freed as unarmed units. If the only adjacent armed enemy unit is in melee, berserk, vehicular, the broken unit must route away or be eliminated to failure to route. If this happens, the elimination does not occur, the no quarter penalties. So what is the no quarter penalty, and what is that whole rule about? Well, it's quite simple. If we scroll down here to our no quarter rule, which is section 20.3 no quarter, the captor may opt to reject surrendering units the instance of its capture and eliminate it instead. So basically, when the enemy unit goes to surrender, you can say, no, I decide not to. You eliminate it, either that unit or stack that's surrendering. At that time, once he does this, all other enemy units will subsequently use low crawl or risk interdiction to avoid surrendering, and even disrupted units. When one side invokes no quarter by rejecting a surrender, the other side's ability to accept surrenders is unaffected. The rejected surrendering unit does not count towards the battlefield integrity casualty tally. So what that's basically saying is if one player decides to invoke no quarter, the other player doesn't necessarily have to invoke no quarter as well. So you can have one side doing no quarter and the other side accepting prisoners. You can have both sides accepting prisoners, or you can have both sides doing no quarter. Related to the no quarter rule is section 20.4. Once you've started to accept prisoners, if you ever change your mind and massacre your captured units, their prisoner unit, once you've done that, then that invokes this rule 20.4. Only certain units can do this, though. SS, Japanese, partisan, Russians, or berserk infantry, cavalry, not melee, may eliminate an unarmed prisoner in their location, not in the act of escaping. Basically, once you do this, the enemy is going to receive a bonus for the rest of his units here. Should a massacre occur, the ELR of all enemy units from that scenario will increase by 1 for the rest of the scenario to a maximum of 6. So if you start accepting prisoners later on this scenario, you decide, oh, you know, I really don't want to I don't want these units as prisoners. You basically massacre them. At that point, ELR of your opponent's units are going to go up by 1 to a maximum of 6 for the rest of the scenario. And it also invokes the 20.3 no quarter rule. So once you've massacred prisoners, you basically are more detrimental to your own units because you're helping your opponent. You're giving them a maximum bonus to his ELR, basically. So you should think about whether or not at the beginning of this scenario, when you're sitting down thinking and playing and kind of getting the gist of what's going on, if you start accepting prisoners and then change your mind about these prisoners and massacre them, it's going to be a bigger problem than just invoking no quarter right off the bat. So there is kind of the rules on when a unit will surrender, 20.21, and there's also 20.22, which is kind of important too. A lot of people don't know this, but you can actually try to capture prisoners instead of eliminate your opponent's units in close combat. You're going to add +1 to your die roll during your close combat, and if your final die roll is less than your close combat kill number, then all defending units are going to be captured. If your final close combat die roll is equal to your kill number, one defending unit of the defender's choice is captured. And if that unit was a full squad, basically a half squad, the defending unit is captured, the other half squad remains uncaptured. The +1 die roll should be noted here that the +1 die roll is a -1 against inexperienced personnel, which is Section A of the rule book, subsection 19.35, if you're not sure what inexperienced personnel are. So let's go ahead, and there are a lot of other rules associated with this, but let's talk about it and show you in the Vassal module here. I've got some scenarios set up, and hopefully everything works out well, so we can explain what's going on here. We've got our little town scenario that we've been working on here. It's obviously been a few more turns since the last time we did this, and you can tell by our phase disc here in the top right hand corner. It is the Axis player's route phase. You can quickly see on the board here, actually before we do that, let me zoom off the map here. Up at the top here, these are just the white counters they were talking about. If you look at it, it has a firepower. There are different levels of prisoners. Here we have a two-person one, so this would be either a half squad or a crew, and there's also a 3-counter one, and this would be a full squad. If we look at these rules really quickly here, which is going to be section 20.51 stacking. No, I'm sorry, that's not it. It is. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Firepower, where is it here? That's a guard firepower. I'm sorry. Where the heck is it? Well, I can't find it, of course. Basically, maybe I'll find it later. The one that's in brackets there means that it's got 1 firepower, but it can only use that firepower in close combat against its guard. The guard unit is basically going to be one unit that all of the prisoners are going to be stacked with. Your squads or half squads or whatever that accept prisoners can accept and hold up to 5 times of its stacking limits. If we look at, let's scroll down the bottom here, unit size, I'm sorry, not stacking limits, unit size. So you can hold up to 5 times its unit size number. So single man counters 1, a crew, half squads are 2, squads are 3, 5/8 inch counters are 4, large vehicle guns and its manning infantries are 5. So basically a squad is a 3, a half squad is a 2, and a single man counter is a 1. So in this case, if this unit here in T2, the American 747, since it's a full squad, its unit stacking size is 3 points, 3 times 5, so it could accept up to 15 points worth of prisoners it could actually have control over throughout the scenario. If it's a half squad, such as say N3 here, half squad is a unit size number of 2, 2 times 5 is 10, so we could have up to 10 stacking points worth of prisoners. So A half squad could basically hold 3 full squads, because a full squad is 3 points. 3 times 3 is 9, and it can hold a single man counter one as well. A single man counter, which is 1 point. So a half squad could take up to 3 full squads, and a single man counter, which would be 10 total points, 5 times its unit stacking size of 2. Any more than that, it could not accept. Full squad again could accept up to 15 points. When you accept, and this is kind of an important rule, when you accept prisoners, hopefully I can find this rule as well. I think it is in this here. Oh, here's what I was looking for before. The unarmed units have a firepower factor of 1 in the brackets, which can only be used versus close combat versus personnel. So yeah, I told you I'd find it later. The captor unit becomes the guard and can be relieved of that task during any friendly rally phase or advance phase, in which the prisoners, if not involved with melees with the guard, can be transferred from one unit to another. Only one unit, the one unit directly beneath the prisoner units, is the guard unit. Should the guard unit be eliminated, any other unit capable of accepting transfer, disregarding the phase, may immediately assume the guard position. So if you have a half squad that's guarding some people, it gets shot and killed, you have another half squad in there, they can immediately take over the guard duty for the prisoners immediately. It should be noted that what I'm looking for here, an unbroken guard squad can deploy into a half squad automatically at any time, regardless of nationality or leadership requirements. So if, for example, this unit here in U2 surrenders to the unit in T2, the American unit could immediately deploy into 2 half squads and accept that unit as its prisoner if that was the case. So this is one of the few times that nationalities that can't normally deploy can automatically deploy. So this is a Russian. So if you have Russian units and they're accepting, a full squad is accepting prisoners, you can immediately deploy them into 2 half squads without having a leader there or any other requirements. It's not based on nationality or leader requirements. So that was kind of important that we know that as well. Here's what I was talking about with the stacking. A single guard unit, this is section 20.51. A single guard unit can guard prisoners up to unit size number up to 5 times its own, and can automatically exchange 2 prisoners, crew or half squads for an unarmed squad, and vice versa. So that means if 2 half squads are surrendering to a unit, he can immediately just blend them into 1 full squad. Or if he's got a full squad, he can immediately blend them into 2 half squads if he wanted to, etc., etc. Unarmed units lose all previous armed identity and classification. A crew becomes an unarmed half squad. Prisoners do share the entrenchment status of the guards, but may accompany them as passenger riders on the vehicle. Only if the vehicle has sufficient transport capacity for them all. So if you got a half squad or squad that's got some prisoners and you try to jump aboard a tank to get a ride, you have to accept everybody at the same time or not. Okay, so let's look at a couple examples. I wanted to kind of show you some things that are related to the rules here, but this is the different size. It should be noted your single man counters or leaders and stuff, you're going to need to keep track of those because the leaders, if they escape or are abandoned, they do revert back to their normal status. So if you have a 9-1 leader that turns into a prisoner, you keep track of that because if that unit is set free or escapes or whatever, it will revert back into a 9-1. As opposed to your half squads and squads, if you look at the rule on that, that's going to be section. I think it's under section 20.55 here. Basically, this rule is about how your guards or your prisoners can attack the guards if they become broken. They have to pass a normal task check before they can actually start melee. Once they start melee, etc., etc., we'll get into that. Basically, once they have escaped and rearmed themselves, you're going to replace your squad or half squad with a green or a conscript, depending on your nationality, squad or half squad. So even if your unit started, say, as in 747, if it becomes a prisoner and then later escapes, it's just going to be a green squad or half squad, as opposed to reverting back to a 747. Your leaders will revert back, but your squads and stuff basically are going to revert into green or conscript squads or half squads of its size and nationality. Okay, so let's look at a few examples. Now, as you can see by our phase disk, it's the route phase, it's the Axis player's turn. We have quite a few things going on in here, so let's take it kind of slow and show you here as just a quick overscan. You can see we actually have some units that are already prisoners on the board here, and you can see that in Q6 here we have an American half squad that is a prisoner to a German 338 half squad as well. And you can see over here in N5 we have a broken German unit that has two prisoner units that are two half squads as well. So it looks like the German player has decided to take prisoners, and the Americans, we don't know about the American player yet because he doesn't actually have any prisoners at this point, but it is the Axis player's route phase, so since it's the Axis player, he has to route his units first. There are quite a few examples we're going to go over. If we look at H2 here, we have a crew up in H2 that has been broken. It has, and remember our rule here, if we go back to the beginning here, a broken infantry unit during its route phase is both adjacent to a good order enemy armed unit, infantry or cavalry, and unable to route away, or if they're only able to route away and are subject to interdiction or have to use roll crawl, will surrender to the enemy as a prisoner instead. So let's see if that rule applies to this unit here. In H2, yes, we can quickly see there's an American unit that is adjacent to it. So it must route away if it can. If it has to use, if it can be interdicted or has to use low crawl to get away, then it will surrender at this point. So he cannot route to G2 because he'd still be adjacent. He cannot route to I3 because he'd still be adjacent. He would have to route to I2 where he can be interdicted by these units in H3. Or he'd have to route into H1 where he could be interdicted from the units in G3. So this unit will surrender, this crew unit will surrender to the American player. It should be noted that when they surrender, let's put this in bold here, the captor's choice of units receiving surrender if more than one unit qualifies. So we have several units here that qualify. We have a G3 747, and in H3 we actually have two units. we have a 747, and we have a 747 that is berserk. Now, it's important for the American player, and the reason I set this up is there are several rules we didn't talk about. The first one being the very first part of the section here, where berserk units can neither take prisoners nor be captured. Otherwise, units can be captured in any one of three ways. So berserk units can't take prisoners nor be captured. And they will also, part of that rule, and I don't know why it's not up there, but there are some rules associated with berserk units and prisoners. And I will show you those here as soon as I find them. They're going to be, I've read this like 20 times in the last 2 days. I should know where these parts are. In fact, where is it? Well, not off to a great start here, but where is it about blah 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 blah? Where is it? I want to show you this since we're talking about the berserk units, and these rules tie in together. Yes, we know that. Movement, maybe it's under the movement section here. Of course, I can't find it when I'm looking for it, you know. That's just the way sometimes when you do live recordings, that's what happens. Alright, well, I'll find it later, I'm sure. But basically, the rule is berserk units, if they are stacked in the same location as a prisoner, they will eliminate that prisoner unit the next time they go to activate because it's the closest known enemy unit. If the unit is not in the same location, then the berserk unit will ignore the prisoner unit and choose a different enemy unit as its closest unit. So the reason these rules are important is the American player has a decision to make here. If he decides to, the berserk unit here, we know in H3 can't accept units. It won't accept prisoners, but this unit below it can. If the American player chooses to have this guy accept the prisoner unit, then the prisoner unit will be in the same stack or in the same location as the berserk unit, and the berserk unit will basically, I bet you maybe it's under the massacre rule. Let's look under that real quick. Here it is. Of course. Any berserk unit in the same location with prisoners, whether guarding them or not at the start of their fire phase, will eliminate these prisoners, thereby losing their berserk status. So that's what I was telling you. If the prisoners are in the same location as the berserk unit, the prisoners are in the same location with the berserk unit, whether they are guarding it or not, those units will be eliminated by the berserk unit. If they're not in the same location with the prisoner, a berserk unit will ignore them in determining the closest enemy unit to charge. So exactly what I was saying here, the American player has to decide if the unit in H3 decides to accept the surrender of that unit, then at the start of the berserk unit's fire phase, he's going to just invoke the massacre and wipe these guys out. Fortunately for the American player, he also has this unit in G3. And in G3, he can have the unit accept that surrender, because back into section 20.21, the captor's choice of units that will receive that unit. And as I mentioned before, this crew is going to be replaced by a 2-unit, a half squad prisoner unit. And at this point, when the American decides to accept that, he can then automatically deploy into 2 half squads and accept the surrender. So we're just going to remove the crew counter. We keep track of the units here, and it's only the unit that is directly below the prisoner is the guard unit. So we have 1 guard unit, and we have 1 unit that's not a guard in this case. So the reason I set that up is to show you about the berserking rules and how berserks happen. When the berserk unit does activate its fire, the closest enemy unit is this prisoner unit, but since it's not in its same location, the berserk unit will ignore this and charge somebody else. So that's how the berserk rules are affect prisoners and such. So you have to keep that in mind. If the American player didn't have that unit there and he had to accept the prisoners in H3, then at that point, the berserk unit will be in the same location as the prisoners. At the start of the fire phase, the berserk unit will kill these units, and that will then invoke Rule 20.4, which is the massacre. So that's going to be bad for the American player because it's going to increase the ELR by 1 for the rest of the scenario, and then it's also going to kick in the no quarter rule. So that was the first German unit. We have another German unit here in J4. The reason this is set up the way it is we have a broken unit in J4, and we have actually a melee in K5 between a full squad American unit and a full squad German unit. So the rule associated with this, the reason I set this up is if the only adjacent armed enemy unit is in melee, berserk, or a vehicle, the broken unit must rout away, even if it's disrupted, or be eliminated to failure to rout. Such elimination this way does not occur the no quarter penalties. So if you haven't kicked into no quarter and this unit must rout away but can't for some reason, it will be eliminated, but it doesn't automatically kick in the no quarter penalty. So let's take a look at this here. J4, broken German unit, has a American unit that's in melee. It's the only one that's adjacent to it. So he must rout away or be eliminated for failure to rout. He cannot route into K4 because he'd still be adjacent. He cannot route into J5 because he'd still be adjacent. He could route into J3, but then he'd be interdicted. He'd have to risk interdiction. He could not route into I4 because he'd be going closer to a known enemy unit. Fortunately for the German player, though, he can enter into I5 because of the wreck providing a +1 TEM. It is not considered a clear hex, so he does not have to worry about interdiction. And then he can route into I5 at this point. And he's not gone any closer to a known enemy unit, and I believe he can route there. So he must route away or he'd be eliminated for failure to route, because the situation in K5 with the melee going on. So that's how that is handled through the rules. If we look at this unit here in L6, broken German unit adjacent to a American unit. American player or the German player must route away or be eliminated for failure to route. or he would have to surrender. In this case, he cannot go to M7 because he'd still be adjacent. He cannot go to K6. He could not go to L5 because he would be interdicted from this unit here in K7. Can he move into M6 is the question. If we look at a line of sight here, you can clearly see that this unit here in R7 has line of sight to M6. Can the German player actually move into that hex to go away? Or must the unit, would he be interdicted in this hex? In this case, he would be interdicted and have to surrender to the American player. The actual answer to this rule is yes, he can actually enter into M6 because the American player to be interdicted, he must be within the normal range of an enemy in line of sight. In this case, the American player has a range of 4 hexes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a long range. It would be a long range shot. So this American player cannot interdict this German player in M6. What do we have here? We just have a broken knee. Okay. So he can then enter into this hex here, and for, let's see, 1 movement point, 2 to go into there. So that's 3 movement points, and then he could, move into maybe this hex if he wanted to at that point, or maybe this hex, or he could just stay here, whatever German player decides to do. So basically the rule with this one is this German player would have to surrender if he would be interdicted or cannot route. In this case, he would be interdicted in this hex. He would be interdicted into this hex. He's not interdicted into this hex, so he does have a safe way to route away because of the only American player that can see this unit is outside his normal range, and then he would go to M5. Let's look at this hex here. Rule is N5 here. We have a broken unit. We have a broken German, looks like a half squad there, and he's got 2 half squad prisoners. So how does that, how is that, what rules are associated with that? Movement 12.53. Prisoners do not route while guarded unless the guard routes, in which case they accompany the guard, section 20.53. Guards can abandon their prisoners by choice if they want. Abandoned prisoners are still protected, subsequently being eliminated by that side that caused it to be abandoned, causes the massacre rule to immediately take effect. So basically what that's saying is the German player can say, you know what, I am just going to leave you guys here, and I'm going to move back here myself, so I'm kind of abandoning you, and then this unit can't just next time open up on the prisoner units here and try to wipe them out so they can't, run away and escape. If the German player does that, basically that rule kicks in, and it's still considered a massacre. And even though you've released them from your thing, you can't just go ahead and say, okay, well then I'm just going to blow you away after, I'm just going to, don't go anywhere, guys. We're not going to shoot you, but just stay right here and then just blow them away next turn. Anyways, the rule I wanted to talk about was prisoners don't route unless they're guard routes, in which case they accompany the guard. In this case, the prisoners will just route with the guard. Now, the German player can stay right here if he wanted to because he's not in an open hex, etc., etc. Or he can route back into this hex, or whatever he decides to do. But the German player has to be careful because it is broken and he has prisoners, and so there's going to be some other rules that are going to kick in here in just a few minutes. Let's see what else we have broken wise. Broken units here, that's an American. Here's another German player here. Q3 is broken, but is not adjacent to an known enemy unit, so it doesn't have to route if it doesn't want to, and the German player just decides to not have it route. Let's look at X4 here. We have another example here that I set up. We have a broken German half squad. There he is surrounded by American squad in X3 and X5. It has nowhere to go whatsoever, so it will surrender. At this point, the American player, he doesn't even have a route path. We don't have to worry about interdiction or low crawling or anything like that. He's got nowhere it can actually move without being adjacent to a American unit, so it will immediately surrender. And let's say, for example, just to throw in another rule or set of rules here, the American player at that point decides to kick in the no quarter rule and say, you know what, I'm not accepting your surrender. So the German player unit is eliminated, and the no quarter rule kicks in. Now, it's not a massacre because he didn't massacre any prisoners, but he's decided that he's no longer accepting prisoners. So the German player no longer has to worry about surrendering his units to the American player. If you look at I2, this is the reason I set this up. In I2, we have a German player that is broken. It's adjacent to some American units. If the American player had not invoked no quarter, the German player could not go there without being interdicted, could not go there without being interdicted, could not go there without being interdicted, could not go there because he'd still be adjacent, so he would have surrendered. But because the American player has now invoked no quarter, the German player will now risk interdiction to get away. So the German player will say, okay, well, I have to go here, and in this case, you can interdict me with your units. I have to make a morale check of 7. Let's see if he passes his morale check. He rolls a 2 and a 1 for a total of 3, so he makes his morale check. He passes his interdiction, and then ends up going into this hex here. So that was all because the American player decided to invoke the no quarter rule when it wiped out this unit in X4. So by invoking that rule, now the American player has to worry about the German player getting his units away and rallying these units and then coming back later in this scenario to cause the American player more damage, more heartache, and more problems. But he decided that, I don't really want to accept any more prisoners for whatever reason, and, that's what he decided to do. So that, I believe, is all of the German players. There's also one here in V5. Since it's not adjacent to a known enemy unit, he does not have to route away. And in this case, it's good thing he decides not to. He'll just stay right there in the wood building, I believe is a wood building. All right. And I believe that was all of the German players' broken units. So we will now look at, get this out of the way. Let's look at the American, see if the American has any situations that need to be resolved here. Okay, we have one here in P4. P4, we have a full squad, and we have a broken American unit. The broken American unit must route away because it has a adjacent known enemy unit. And so he can't go into Q4 because he'd still be adjacent. He can't go into P5. He can go into O5, but he'd be interdicted, yes, by this unit in N3. He can't go into O4 because he'd be interdicted. And so basically, at that point, the American unit must surrender to the German player. The German player has not invoked no quarter or anything, such as the American player did. So the German player can accept his surrender or invoke no quarter. Basically, he decides, yeah, I'll go ahead and accept your unit. It is a full-size squad, and we'll put that in. Remember, it's just the unit that is beneath it. And don't forget, the German player can decide immediately if he wanted to deploy that full squad into two half squads. But he decides not to do that because he has this other American full squad next to him. So he decides, yeah, probably would be a better idea to actually deploy into two half squads. But in this case, for whatever reason, the German player decides not to. Um, let's see. Any other broken? Okay, we have one here in X6. X6. It's adjacent. It's a crew that was broken. Has to route away. Or if you can't do it without being interdicted or low crawling, in this case, the crew can move up into X5 um, to get away from the German unit there in Y7. And then he can continue his route if he wanted to. In this case, he does. To get even farther away, get in the building there. So he could try to recover. And so he doesn't need to surrender because he can actually has a valid route path away that he doesn't need to be interdicted or low crawled. So that guy's taking care of. Let's see if there's anybody else that we had talked about. I think that's pretty much it for the route phase, and kind of covered some of the rules that we had talked about with what is associated with um, prisoners. Now we're going to move on to the advanced phase. The German player goes ahead and does all his advances, yada yada yada. Maybe moves this unit in there, and maybe advances into here, and does all his advances, yada yada yada. And once he's done with that, we go on to the close combat phase. At this point, the American player can choose to activate another new rule we're going to look at. If we look at these units in N4, remember this unit was originally here and decided to route away because it's broken, but he took his prisoners with him. The rule that's associated with that is basically how the enemy units try to escape, which is section 20.55 escape. Unless a melee exists in the location, prisoners must pass a normal task check before they can attack their guards. What that means is if the American player is somehow able to get one of his units into that hex and start a melee, then basically at that point the prisoners can then choose to join in the close combat without having to do a task check, but to start an actual close combat with its guard. Now, the guard must be broken, and then it must pass a normal task check before it can even attempt this. This attack can only occur during the close combat phase, and only if the guard is broken. Once a melee exists within a location, prisoners may, during the close combat phase, attack without passing. Sorry about that. My mouse went a little wanky. Where'd it go? Here we go. Basically, once a melee already exists, the prisoners during the close combat phase can attack without passing a normal task check, even if the guard is not broken. So once a melee starts, the guards can then jump in, basically. Prisoners must eliminate the guard before they can attack any other unit in the location, unless they attack the guard and other units as part of the same close combat attack. So remember when we talked about the little parentheses around the one, they can only attack basically their guard, or they can attack their guard and somebody else at the same time. They just can't choose to fight somebody else. They must fight their guard. They must try to kill off the guard before they can do anything else. Once a melee exists with the guard, prisoners may attempt withdrawal from melee in a subsequent close combat. So if you're in the process of close combating and the next close combat phase comes up, you can try to withdraw to get out of the close combat, basically try to run away. Prisoner close combat attacks are sequential in that the prisoners make all of their close combat attacks before they can be attacked in turn by any survivors and any other enemy units in the location. So instead of attacks being simultaneously, prisoners attack their close combat attacks sequentially before whoever they attack can attack back. Escape is successful only if there are no enemy units in the location other than the prisoners, or by successful withdrawal from melee or infiltration, in which case a former prisoner unit is free to act therein until recaptured. Prisoners eliminated in an escape attempt do not incur any penalties upon the capture and are still counted for victory point purposes, although they don't count double. So if you try to break free and your prisoners end up getting eliminated, they still count for victory point purposes, but not double anymore. An escaped prisoner does not count at all towards victory conditions, unless subsequently eliminated or recaptured. And there are some exceptions. Italians, Japanese, and non-Finnish Axis miners will not attempt escape unless they are abandoned. And there's a little example in the rule book about that. Good thing is section 20.551 and 20.552. Basically, if you are going to get your units, escaped single man counters are always armed. One attacking unarmed infantry unit of equal or smaller size is rearmed immediately for each armed unit that is eliminated or captured in close combat. So basically what that means is if you're, let's take a look here. We have a half squad there, and that is a broken, the German half squad that's broken, and we have two half squads that are prisoners. If for whatever reason or somehow that German unit becomes eliminated, that half squad becomes eliminated, then one of these half squad prisoners will rearm. They're basically going to pick up the weapons from the half squad that's there. If this would be a full squad, if that German unit was a full squad as opposed to a half squad, then both of those prisoner half squads could rearm. So that's basically for every unit that's eliminated or captured in close combat, will supply an equal number of prisoners with rearming abilities. So a half squad or a squad is eliminated, then you can rearm a half squad worth of units once they are able to be rearmed. Of course, the only way to be rearmed is to be the only unit in that. There can't be any enemy units in that location. Once you're rearmed, again, you're going to come back as a green or conscript squad or half squad, depending on the example we're using here in N4. We've got two half squads. One would come back as a if this unit here was eliminated, let's say that in close combat these guys decide to close combat, fight the broken unit there, and they end up killing the broken German unit in close combat. When they do that, one of these units is going to come back, one of these half squads, prisoners, is going to come back as a green American unit, and the other prisoner is just going to stay a prisoner because he doesn't have any he doesn't have any ability to rearm himself yet. And that's where the next rule comes into play, which is Scrounging 20.552, small arm capable of rearming. Any one infantry counter may be scrounged from any non-water marsh hex occupied by an unarmed unit at the end of the movement phase, in which it expends all of its movement factors and movement, not necessarily in the same hex, and is able to roll a 2 on the scrounge die roll. There's a limit of 1 scrounge die roll per hex per movement phase, regardless of the units contained therein. An unarmed unit is replaced with a green conscript, either a squad or half squad, depending on what the prisoner unit size was. And of course, if you can scrounge Rex, you have a better chance of success. So is able to roll a 2 on a scrounge die roll. So basically what that's saying is the units here, if 2 half squads, they fight in close combat, they kill that broken German half squad, one of the half squad prisoners will immediately come back as a green American unit, and the other one could then try to scrounge weapons from different locations by spending all of its movement factors in that location trying to find some weapons. They're basically running around picking up bottles and knives and whatever they can find that's littered the battlefield, and even just equipping themselves with some broken weapons that they found in the battlefield or whatever. So that's what the scrounging is. Basically, if if they can do that, then they can come back as green or green units for the Americans or conscripts, depending on the nationality that you are playing at the time. And of course, you got your unit size number, which we already looked at. So yeah, there are quite a few rules associated with prisoners. They're not very complex. I would recommend that you just spend a little time reading Section 20, giving it a good go-over, and hopefully some of these examples just showed you how things come into play. Of course, with all of the ASL rules, there's always exceptions to some of the rules, so make sure you read through those. But hopefully this video is able to give you some examples on how taking prisoners is done, the rules associated with those, and some of the rules and penalties associated with close quarter. Basically, once you've invoked close quarter, all of Section 20 of the rule book is pretty much null and void for you anymore, so you don't have to worry about them. But as I had mentioned earlier, once you do invoke no quarter, then all of a sudden you got a problem with all of these units risking interdiction to get away from you, and then rallying and coming back later as full units to do damage to you. So in this case, if this unit here, the American player invoked no quarter, this unit risked interdiction to get away. Next time German player's turn, maybe it rallies. All of a sudden, if it rallies, it comes back as a 4, 6, 7 unit that all of a sudden can start shooting and capturing objectives and blocking route paths and all sorts of great things that the German players' units can do. So understanding the prisoner rules, understanding how to the advantages of using the prisoners, even though it adds some tactical elements and some variety. There's a lot of rules associated with there is some risk involved. If your guard units become broken, then you have to worry about the units starting melee with you and trying to escape and break free and etc., etc. But sometimes it might be worth trying to take the prisoner units, especially, and I'm not even sure if we mentioned this, but the rule number 1 here is the value, which is important. Every unit which surrenders or is captured and still under guard, it should be noted, still under guard, so you can't just capture the prisoner and then let them go, and they don't count because they're not under guard. At the end of the scenario is worth double its normal victory condition value. So if you're especially playing with the scenario in which victory points is the key element to the victor of the side, taking prisoners can severely help you with that scenario because all of your surrendered units that are still under guard at the end of the scenario were double their normal value. Remember, berserk units can't take prisoners nor be captured. 20.21 and 20.22 are the rules for when units will surrender. So make sure you read through those, understand these rules really well. And then all the other rules kind of just associate with it. If you invoke no quarter, if you take prisoners and then decide to kill them for whatever reason, you're going to invoke the massacre rule. Here's the rule on the guards and the unarmed units. The stacking, how much a guard can possess. 20.52, here's another problem, I guess, associated with taking prisoners. Guards whose unit size number is less than the total unit size number of the prisoners may not attack any other unit other than the prisoners in close combat and may not use support weapons. So once your squads or half squads get too many prisoners, then they don't have any ability to actually fight anybody else. So that's kind of a detriment to it. But if your guard unit has to be fighting anyways, then you might be in more trouble in this scenario to begin with. Guard's firepower is half for attack purposes when attacking non-prisoners in close combat as well. So if your guard unit is going to be a target by your opponent, so he can try to get all these units back. So he's going to be forcing units to come up and try to close combat your guard units to try and get his units back. So that's kind of another problem with taking prisoners, because all of a sudden your opponent is targeting your guard units. Your guard units can then don't have much firepower, can't attack anybody else, so they're kind of taking some firepower away from you during the scenario. So I'm not saying that taking prisoners is always a wise decision. It's something you just have to consider and think about. Once you understand the rules associated with it, you can hopefully make some better and wise decisions on accepting and or rejecting the taking of prisoners for your scenario. So hopefully this helps you out. Please spend some time. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Please leave any thoughts or comments, suggestions. It has decided to do a video on this is because somebody had emailed me or posted a comment. I forget, but basically got a hold of me and said, "Hey, I really want to learn about prisoners and all the rules associated with prisoners. So if you have something you're looking for, you want some rule explained or whatever, please do leave a comment and say, hey, I'd really like to learn about this. I really like to learn about that." I'm not basically going step by step through the rule book. I'm just basically listening to what people say and kind of doing videos on different subjects and trying to just find things that people are interested in to learn, and some of the rules that are throughout the rule book. Please, if you're going to leave comments and thoughts and suggestions or whatever, I am not at this point ready to do a video on off-board artillery. I've had several requests for OBA, the rules associated with OBA. I personally don't play any scenarios. I've never played a scenario with OBA. I'm probably not as proficient with this part of the rules as I should be. Eventually I might go ahead and look at doing some scenario or some rule or some videos on the OBA, but at this point I'm still kind of going through them and learning them myself, just because they are a mess. Let's just put it that way. They are a freaking mess, and they're just, I think it would probably be 3 or 4 videos just to go over the OBA, and I'm not sure I want to spend that amount of time, trouble, and effort on something that is just not used very often in scenarios. So I don't know. We'll see about it. But if you have any of the other rules that you want to be covered, you can look at my other video series, see if there's any rules, or see if your subject is covered in any of my other video series or in this video series. If it's not, please leave a thought or comment or suggestion on what you'd like to see done, and I will certainly get to it. And I do appreciate everyone watching my videos and spending time analyzing and going over this stuff, and hopefully it has been a big help. I've had a lot of really good positive input from a lot of people in the last several months since I started this video series again, and just a lot of great comments, and I like to hear these things just because um, it shows that there's people out there that need this information and enjoy this information. And the biggest complaint I get is I ramble on too much, and so I've rambled on here way too long, so I'm going to bring this video to a close. So until the next time we get together, this is your host, ID Jester, signing off.